Welcome to the Typical Sportsman podcast. I've got one of my good friends, one of my mentors, one of my bow hunting legends in my eyes, Mr. Jim Willems. Jim was the past president of Pope & Young. And really, I'm going to tell you the whole gist of today's episode is what it means to really, truly be a bow hunter. What it means to really, truly wear that badge of bow hunter. But also the importance of organizations like Pope & Young that are fighting for your rights as a bow hunter. We also talk about some of the changes that Jim has seen take place in the Pope & Young Club, as well as some things that you might see in the near future. We have pretty recently changed the acceptance of lighted sights. And so we talk about what all goes into that. I shouldn't say lighted sights, illuminated pins. We talk about the recent change that took place there. What all goes into changes like that? There is a new category, a new big game category being introduced into Pope & Young, and we talk about that, which is an exciting category. We both love to hunt this said species, and so we talk about that, and we do tell you the species in the episode, so stay tuned. It is a really fun episode, a really good episode, but I just want to challenge you today to think about or not to think about, but to be reminded that bow hunting is a beautiful privilege that we have. And to wear the badge of bow hunter is something to be proud of. And Pope & Young is that club of bow hunters that are proud to stand with you. Guys, I hope you enjoy it. This episode is brought to you by our good friends over at ScentLock. In my opinion, some of the very best whitetail hunting gear that you can ever buy. So go check out ScentLock. If you are a bow hunter, make sure and check out the BE1 Toolkit, which is the Bowhunter Elite Toolkit built by bow hunters for bow hunters. Everything was thought out to be clothing made for bow hunters. But let's jump in with Mr. Jim Willems and talk about what it means to be a bow hunter.
Thanks for having me. For the true sportsman, it's more than a pastime. It's a way of life. Embrace the lifestyle of hunting, fishing, and the thrill of the wild. Live the life. Be typical.
I have had a long time love for Garmin products, and for good reason. When it comes to smartwatches, when it comes to GPS wearables and handhelds, when it comes to devices to stay in touch with my friends and family when I'm off grid, there's just simply nobody that can compete with Garmin. Here's the best part. They make something for everybody in every price range. So whether you're looking for something like the Instinct, which is one of my favorite watches of all time, it's incredibly well built. It is priced phenomenally, but it is also just as tough as nails. You could throw that thing through a meat grinder and it's going to come out just like the day you bought it. All of that, and it still offers me all of the GPS features that I need when I'm on the mountain, still offers me all of the cool smartwatch features that I want when I'm in the office or at the gym or tracking my sleep habits. And then you move up to something like the Tactic series, which has ballistics built into it. It's got lights built into it so that you can use it as a flashlight around camp. It has full color GPS maps. Guys, Garmin has something for you. And then you move on to something like the InReach, which is the best thing that you could ever have to stay in touch with friends and family when you're off grid. Let me tell you something. Mama likes getting text message when I'm on the mountain just to tell her that I'm safe and that I love her. But it also gives her an incredible peace of mind knowing that that little device in my hand, if something were to happen with the touch of a button, I can let her know where I'm at. I can also alert rescue teams to let them know where I'm at. Guys, I literally trust Garmin with my life. And then as far as the bow shop goes, they make the best chronographs that you could ever get your hands on. Guys, here's what I'm going to tell you. Whether you're looking for a new wearable to just get smart notifications when you're in the office, or a new wearable to track your sleep habits and your workouts in the gym, or whether you're looking to go off grid with full color GPS maps, Garmin has a wearable for you. They also have a full line of handheld GPS and devices to stay in touch with friends and family. Guys, go check out Garmin.com because I have never one time went wrong with the Garmin product. All right, Mr. Jim Willems, the legend himself.
Yeah, right. How you doing, Dylan?
Something, huh?
It's legendary. That is right. I don't know what for.
It's Tom Hoffman said it best when he did the podcast. He said, I have a reputation around here. He said, not a good one.
Yeah,
I've got one.
Yeah, that was a good one. Oh, that was a good podcast. That guy has some experience.
Yes, he does.
He has been to some great places and seen a lot of cool stuff.
Incredibly nice guy too. Just very humble, very kind.
He's one of the happiest guys you'll ever want to meet.
Yeah. Now he came up to me after the convention, and he said, "I heard we're going hunting together." And I said, "Well, I'm the first to hear about this." I said, "What do you mean we're going
bird hunting?"
Yeah. He said, "Well, I won that hunt with your buddy there in Kansas, and it says it's at your house pretty much." I'm like, "Yeah, we're going hunting together." So,
well, you can blame me for that. I knew he'd won it, and I said, "Well, when you go, let me know." And he said, "Is it any good? Is it any good?" And I said, "Well, talk to Dylan about it. I've heard it's really good."
See, I guess so this part of the world is the only place I've ever upland hunted. Grew up in Arkansas. We don't have pheasants. But when my sister started dating a guy from Wichita, he was a big pheasant hunter. And so we drive up and pheasant hunt with him around this area. So this is really all I've ever known. Well, after ATA this year, I brought Justin back here and we chased some quail and pheasants, and he was just blown away. He's like, "Dude, this is phenomenal quail hunting ground." Like, I've never seen this good of habitat anywhere.
Yeah. Southeast Kansas has been great quail hunting forever.
Yeah. And our pheasants are making and I don't know how much you keep up with the birds around here, but probably 20. Well, we had real bad flooding. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
The highways were shut down. And it took a bad toll on the birds. And, but they're making a good comeback. And there for a few years, I never saw pheasants anywhere. Like you just see them when you're driving down the road, they'd run across. But it's getting back to that now. So.
Right. Yeah. North central Kansas, where my place is, the drought in 13, 14, 15 just totally wiped them out. Wiped them out. And then they were just starting to come back again. And then a couple of years ago, it got dry again. So everything's against the pheasants. The quail seem to be doing okay now, but the pheasants just can't seem to make it back. Between the drought and the predators and the raptors and just everything is against them. The farming practices don't help at all. And, Kansas was so good for pheasant hunting for my entire life up until that drought. And now the Western Kansas has come back.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good hunting out there, but Central Kansas is still just struggling, and it's tough.
Do you do a lot of upland hunting?
I used to do a lot. Well, in fact, I grew up in Kansas, and, you couldn't get a deer tag till you're 16. So you started out with a 22 and a shotgun. And the farm I grew up on, I could get off the school bus at 4:30 and have my limit of pheasants before the sun went down.
Nice.
That's how good it was.
That's awesome.
That's how good it was.
So I wanted to ask you kind of about those, about the deer hunting when you were growing up. So I met a guy, and he's quite a bit older than you. I'm going to say 20 years older than you probably. But this was such a cool conversation because he remembers when bow hunting was not legal in Kansas.
Sure.
And he remembers when Pope and Young started that first bow hunting season.
Yeah.
And so it was a really cool conversation. He runs an outfit there in just outside of Winfield. And so I had that conversation with him, and he's like, people think of Kansas today and they think great deer hunting. And, we drive on our way to dinner and you'll see, 40 deer in a field maybe. He's like, when I was a kid, you didn't see deer.
Right.
Like if you saw one deer a year, it was like, oh my gosh, I saw a deer.
Oh yeah.
So how have you seen Kansas, change over the years as far as the health of the deer population?
Well, it's just changed dramatically. The first licensed deer hunt, modern licensed deer hunt in Kansas was 1965. And for the most part, the deer were concentrated in the eastern part of the state where there was more timber. But I didn't see my first deer till I was 14 years old. That would have been 1976, my first deer in Kansas.
Now you see them in your backyard.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I saw a buck and two does walk across a wheat field. Oh, it was yellow wheat. So I guess it was, probably late June. And it was just so exciting to see that. And my dad I grew up on a farm. My dad was a landowner, and the whole decade of the 70s, he'd applied for a deer tag every year, and he drew 2 tags in the 70s as a landowner. And half of the tags went to landowners. That's how hard it was to get a tag. And the population was so low, the tags were really limited, which turns out it worked great. They kept the licenses limited, and then The population started to pick up a little more, and then some of the habitat improved a little bit. And because of the limited license, I should step back. The limited license was for the rifle tag.
Yeah.
You get a bow tag every year. But you had to apply at the same time you applied for a rifle. It wasn't either or it was either or. You couldn't do either one. And so my dad, he drew 2 tags in the 70s. I drew a rifle tag when I was 16, the first year I was eligible to do it. And my dad just hated me for that because he'd gone 4 or 5 years without a tag. He didn't hate me. He was excited for me, but I felt sorry for him. Yeah. So I drew a rifle tag and I was going to high school. We didn't have any deer on our property. Right. There was no deer. And I ended up finding two places I got permission to hunt, and ended up seeing 22 does through the 9-day rifle hunt. And I never saw a buck. Never got a shot. Never saw one. And that was my deer hunting experience. My brother was 3 years older than I, and he'd kind of gone the same way. He drew his tag. He was about 17 when he drew a rifle tag. And then he realized, well, you couldn't even apply for a deer tag the year after you drew one. You had to sit out a year, but you could get a bow tag. So he had some friends that were kind of bow hunters, and a couple of them were pretty successful. And so he went and bought a bow and applied for the tag and killed a buck with his bow the first year.
That's cool.
And so after I did my rifle hunt and didn't kill one, I followed in his footsteps. And I actually bought his bow and he upgraded. Yeah. And been bow hunted Kansas deer every year since.
Yeah.
So then going
kill mega giants.
Yeah. It's been the Kansas hunt is for me has been just from day one. It's just been phenomenal.
Yeah.
Back in the late 70s when I first started bow hunting, you didn't see very many deer, but my word, there was a few monsters. Yeah. Every now and then you'd see something just enormous. And of course that was before trail cameras, so you didn't even know they were there. You'd see a big track. And then you'd see a 125-inch 8-point that had a big body, and you say, well, there he is. And, you'd try to shoot that buck. And if you hunted hard enough, which, in your high school, it's hard to do between football and working and all that. And then I took over the family farm and doing that on my own. I was able to hunt more, but I still surprisingly didn't get to do a lot of hunting. But I'd try to pick out times in November when I could hunt the rut, and saw some monster bucks back in the day.
Now, I think Kansas, maybe more so than any other state, is like the perfect testimony of the North American model of wildlife conservation, because you hear those stories of like, I didn't see my first deer until I was 14, or you never saw a deer. But then as soon as hunting seasons were introduced and regulations were put in place, and now Kansas is a mecca of deer hunting. And it's a wonderful testimony to the North American model of wildlife conservation.
It really is. And fortunately, we had some really good biologists back in the 60s that set up the first seasons. And probably the single reason Kansas is right there with Iowa and Wisconsin as top tier deer season is because they don't let rifle hunters hunt during the rut.
Yeah.
Nebraska's same habitat as Kansas and Iowa. There's no difference, but Nebraska isn't known for big deer at all. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Well, they start hunting with a rifle the second Saturday in November, which is the beginning to the peak of the rut. Mm-hmm. And they have I believe it's a 9-day season, and they give 2 tags over the counter.
Yeah. Oh, I've said so many times, if you could shoot a rifle during the rut, in Kansas, especially with how open it is, how far you can see, you shoot a mega giant the first 10 minutes.
And that lasts for about 3 years. And then all of the older bucks are gone and they aren't allowed to get big enough. But that's why I say, thank goodness that the biologists set our Kansas rifle season was used to be the first Saturday in December for decades. It was the first Saturday in December. And year after year after year, the rifle hunters try to get it moved up so they can hunt earlier because they want to hunt during the rut.
Right.
But they don't realize that that'll only last a couple of years, and then you're Nebraska where you're shooting 120-inch deer instead of 140-inch deer. Makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And hunting in December with a rifle, if you know where there's a big buck, you should be able to kill it. Yeah. It shouldn't be that difficult. So we're just fortunate with our season structure. We're really fortunate that, they started out with limited rifle tags, and that didn't change until, I don't really know, probably early 90s. By then, the population had just exploded.
Yeah.
And it was a combination of limited hunting. They just didn't wipe them all out. And introduction of the CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program, that created a heck of a lot more habitat for them. And also the forestation of the state. There's I don't know what the percentage is, but the percentage of trees in the state of Kansas is astronomical compared to what it was 200 years ago.
So going back real quick, just so people understand what you're talking about there, how does the CRP program work? Like, it's basically just farmers agreeing to let this grow as native, right?
Yes, pretty much. So the original part was we're going to take poor soil out of farming.
Right.
It was for erosion control and wildlife habitat. It was two parts. And the erosion control is to try to keep the dirt from silting into the rivers and then just going all the way down the Mississippi and into the ocean. So they took out, they allowed farmers that had marginal farm ground to enroll in the CRP program. They planted to grass, and originally it was all native grasses. And then they decided, well, let's see what we can do for the pheasants and quail. So then they added flowers and pollinators for the bees. They added a whole lot of other stuff that they plant in there. And then they pay the farmer so much per acre per year for that property. And it's usually a 10-year contract.
And if I'm right, they give you the seed, right?
I think you pay for half of it.
Okay.
Yep. And which is good because grass seed is ungodly expensive. Yeah. I have land and I have some CRP, and I had some that I had to reseed 2 years ago, and it was over $100 an acre just for the seed up front. And I think that was my half was over $100 an acre. But it's great for the wildlife. You have this property that
now,
primarily
to do anything to it, like.
No, you're not. Unless there's an emergency, they have some emergency drought haying projects you can do. But for the most part, you have to leave it. They do have, what do they call it? A management can't think of the word, management process or program or something.
Yeah.
Say you have you have a quarter section that's in the program for 10 years. At 5 years, you either have to burn it, which cleans it up and kills trees growing in it. One of the programs, they will allow you to disc it. All of mine always burned, which I hate. Oh, it's just so, so risky to burn in Kansas in the springtime.
Yeah.
But you burn up the stuff that's down on the ground that allows other stuff to come up. So it's really good for the wildlife to clean it out and bring other stuff up. And if cedar trees are growing in it, it kills the cedar trees. And, part of the program in Kansas in particular, they don't let you do any trees in CRP. And their reasoning for it, from what I understand, is they don't want a raptor roost. They don't want a tree out in the middle of the grassland for the raptors to set on and go out and kill the prairie chickens and the pheasants and the quail, which makes sense. But, as a deer hunter,
a light post and do the same thing.
Yeah, I know.
Or a electric post, whatever.
Yeah. But as a deer hunter, I want trees and brush and I want cover, but they don't let you do that.
Right.
So, I've had some property come out of CRP that I've gone back in and planted some trees in it and just tried to turn it into pure deer habitat. But I don't know. Did I answer the question good enough about the CRP?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I actually got a phone call yesterday. I have 22 acres coming out. The 10-year contract ends in October, and they called and asked if I wanted to join back up. And I had actually called and that's at the FSA office, the Farm Service Agency, part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I'd called them a couple of months ago. I said, hey, the contract's coming out. Will there be another contract? And of course, that was too close to after January 21st. And they're like, no, we have no idea. But apparently they've secured some funds for it. And I have until June 6th to get this re-signed up, which is great. I want to sign it back up.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tough for the farmers now because you can make more money off of it if you take it off of CRP and plant it back to wheat or milo or, a cash crop. So a lot of farmers have done that. Just out of self-preservation because they need to make the money. But fortunately, I don't have to do that. And the pieces I have in CRP are
and you'd rather hunt than work a hay.
Oh my goodness,
work a hayfield.
Yeah, but all of the property I have that's in CRP is real marginal farm ground.
Yeah,
and then they also have a program where they do filter strips, which is strips of grass around creek bottoms that keeps the erosion down. That gives it some place to catch the dirt before it runs into the creek bottom and washes on down. So I have filter strips, and between the filter strips and all these little tiny patches I have, oh my goodness, I might have 30 or 40 patches of CRP.
Wow.
Yeah.
Set it up as a mecca.
You go to burn that, you have to burn that every 5 years. And oh man,
that's a lot of work.
It's tough. It's a lot of work. And
Jim has built the deer hunting paradise that like, you just say, "Oh, I'll come shoot your dings." Like the ones that you're passing up, like I got them for you,
Yeah, but they might grow up and be a big one.
Yeah,
2 or 3 years.
Yeah, for sure. So, has your entire bow hunting journey always been traditional? Did you ever shoot a compound?
I did shoot a compound. I started. Let's see, I would have started in '78, I think, and that was 6 or 8 years after the introduction of the compound bow. And the compound bow just took bow hunting over by storm back in the day. And there were very few bow manufacturers that even still made a recurve or a longbow that you could buy, off the shelf. You're really down to a handful of custom bow makers, and Bear. I think Bear still had a couple of models that they were selling.
So I was going to ask you, being the ones that helped, kind of take that over if they continued to make.
They did. They never stopped. It seems like Ben Pearson had gone under or quit, and wing archery. I don't recall how many of them switched over to compound bows or if they just went out of business. Yeah. And so I started with, late 70s. Bear made a 6-wheel compound. They had 2 of them. It was the Bear Whitetail, which was fiberglass limbs, and then the Bear Polar LTD, and it had wood laminated limbs.
Yeah.
And there was a wheel that cammed down on the riser that you could change the weight from like 45 to 70 pounds wherever you put that wheel. It kind of spun around and you could clamp it down. And that was my first bow. Probably, looking back, it probably shot about the same speed as my recurve bow does today.
Yeah.
The modern recurves and longbows are so much more efficient than they were 45 years ago. That
I'm all for, and we were actually just talking about this, and we're actually about to work on tuning that bow. I'm all for like maximizing your equipment's efficiency, but you hear so many guys that like go down this rabbit hole, and I'm like, you do know that, they shot them with 40-pound recurves with sharp rocks on the end of, sticks not too long ago, and they did just fine. Right. Because you're right, man, that first bow that I got, my dad handed me down a 1960, somewhere in there. No, not that old, probably. A Hoyt Game Getter. You might even know the year, but he had it because that's what Chuck Adams shot back in the day. And
that would have been in the 80s.
Yeah. And that was the first bow I got. Yeah. And I remember, watching Dad kill deer with that bow, and I shot a deer with that bow. And now you get into the weeds and you're thinking like, you'll spend a week deciding between 2 different broadheads. And you're like, dude, I'm shooting a bow that's shooting 300 feet per second, an arrow that's flying incredibly well. Like,
right.
Sometimes we just put way too much and we just forget to just go hunt,
Oh yeah, I get it. And just looking back at the history of the compound bow, it was up until probably early 90s. It was just a round wheel bow with a 50% let off, and then PSE and I remember them specifically because I'd met and kind of knew Pete Shepley, and he really got into the cams and maximizing the efficiency of a bow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there were other bowyers that were doing it at the time. But then all of a sudden, it's more speed. And there was a reason for it. That was before laser rangefinders.
Yeah.
Unless you were really good at judging distance, you were really limited on how far you could shoot.
Your rangefinder was your first shot. You shoot once and figure out, a little too high.
Yeah, that's what they say. But so the original speed bows was all about flattening the arc of the arrow.
Now, do you remember in that time, like what the speeds were? I mean, 200 feet per second, 250?
You know, I really don't. But and kind of the same thing. I talked to Pete Shepley 15 years ago. I'd seen him at an event, and he said we're about as fast as we're ever going to get. He said we have tried every different cam modulation and tried all the composites, and he said we're just not going to get much more speed out of a compound bow anymore.
You know, it was actually 15 years ago, because I remember that was the time I was working in a bow shop, and about that time they were just trying to peak, you know, and they were trying to get as fat, and bows are blowing up, and bows weren't performing well, and you know, they were loud as all get out. And now I feel like they've kind of settled back down to that mark where it's just going to be.
Yeah. And once again, I think the rangefinder has helped that a lot, because back in the day, it was all about speed. And to get speed, you had to maximize the efficiency of your bow, and then you shot a lighter arrow. Mm-hmm. You shot as light an arrow as you could. And then, you know, it's almost like dry firing your bow. That's when you have bows blow up, because you just don't have the resistance. And now with the rangefinders, you have tougher bows. You know, bows are bulletproof now.
Yeah.
Just unreal how tough they are. But we kind of gave up. For the most part, people gave up on we have to have the fastest bow. Now people are more in tune with the most forgiving bow.
Oh yeah.
You know, it might shoot, it might shoot 20 or 30 feet per second less, but the smooth draw and a smooth release, and it just feels good and it's quiet, and people are all about that now.
So I do want to get back to your bow hunting journey of where you started, but I do want to ask you a question as we talk about the advancements in technology and the way bows perform. As a traditional bow hunter, does it almost kind of not upset you, but to see guys shooting deer 80, 90 yards? Like, is that just like, okay, you've lost the skill of being a hunter and you're just a good shot?
Well, that's exactly what it is. And I can't say it upsets me. Well, it upsets me when people do it who aren't capable of doing it. That's what upsets me.
But see, I think even the ones who are capable, like if you come out and brag and say, I shot a deer at 100 yards, you have to think, okay, why though?
Yeah.
Like, could you not get any closer? Or were you just trying to show how far you could shoot a deer? Like, when you do that, you're minimizing that deer's life to nothing more than a target.
That's exactly right. And you have to go back to, why do we bow hunt?
Yeah. You
know, you could be a rifle hunter. You can hunt with a muzzle, or you can hunt with all kinds of things, or you can shoot them farther. But it one year it hit me. I'm a measurer, so I talked to a lot of bow hunters, and one year I measured some animals for people, and in 1 year, and this has been at least 15 years ago, 113-yard elk.
Oh my gosh.
125-yard antelope and 160-yard mule deer in 1 year. And that, you know,
now don't get me wrong.
I didn't like that at all.
There are animals that you can push the needle on, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, they don't respond. Well, actually the NDA did a study, and they said a deer will respond less to the string noise past 40 than they will inside 40.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyways, that's beside the point. There are species, because of the size of their kill zone, and because an antelope is the stupidest animal to take that far of a shot on, because they're so fast. That deer, I mean, that antelope could be 20 yards from where it was when you shot. Anyways, there are species that you can shoot further on. But man, it just gets almost frustrating.
Well, it's unethical is what it really is, because they take one step and it's a gut shot. They take two steps and you hit them in the tail.
Yeah.
So it's too far to be bow hunting.
Yeah.
Do you really want to be a bow hunter? It's really what it amounts to. And sadly, we know that a whole bunch of people don't really want to be a bow hunter.
Yeah.
And the proof in the pudding is, as soon as they make crossbows legal, half of the bow hunters quit bow hunting, and now they shoot crossbows. And, you know, if it's legal, fine, that's fine. But the old saying goes, a bow hunter will hunt with a bow during the rifle season.
Yeah.
And a bow hunter won't switch to a crossbow during the bow season.
Yeah.
So that's people that, you know, I hate to piss people off, but they just never were really bow hunters. Yeah. They just like the season. Yeah. They like the time to hunt. And, you know, it's legal. Let them do it. But but they weren't real bow hunters.
Right. You know, it's just, you know, a lot of people, and honestly, I'm going to say we saw it probably 5 years ago with the recurve. You know, a couple of big name guys started shooting a recurve, and then everybody wanted to do it. Well, you're not doing it because you just want to be able to brag and you want to be able to show this. And our conversation is exactly why I went to a recurve, because I remember asking myself, I shot a pig at like 53 yards and I'm like, why didn't I get closer?
Yeah.
Like, why didn't I take the time and get in closer? No, I killed the pig. And again, pigs are one of those animals. Like, it's not going to jump the string. It's not going to duck. I mean, shoot it. However, I remember challenging myself with, man, when I started bow hunting, I just wanted to crawl in there and get as close as I could. Now, when I see them, if it's, I'll shoot it. And so I remember thinking to myself, like, I want to try a recurve. Like, I just want to make it that much harder on myself. And I remember that first season, man, it was just like, and I remember calling you when I shot my first deer with a recurve, but I remember that first season, like, you just see so much more.
Yeah.
If a deer's at 40 yards, your hunt's just starting.
Right.
Whereas with a compound, you're done, pack up, go home. But with a recurve, your hunt's just starting. And it almost brought back all of the things I loved about when I became a bow hunter in the first place. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. That's why we always said that a real bow hunter would hunt with a bow during the rifle season, because we want a bow hunt.
Yeah.
And whether you want a bow hunt with a recurve or a longbow or a compound, you still want a bow hunt.
Yeah.
You asked about my journey. So I hunted with a compound bow for 3 or 4 years. You realize this is before rangefinders. So
Right.
I ended up, I think 1981 was the first year I hunted out west, went on elk hunt. Might have been 80, but I think it was 81. And just really struggled with judging distance in the mountains.
It's a lot harder.
Up and down and across. And yeah, it was tough. And actually I got a shot at a cow elk that first year, and I missed it. And I had the range wrong. Mm-hmm. And I had an old family friend that lived in New Mexico that my brother and I went to visit when we were hunting out there. We stayed at his house and then went hunting. And he hunted he might have killed one of the first deer in Kansas with a bow. Killed one opening day with a bow back in 1965 in Rice County. And, I just thought, well, you can't shoot far enough with a recurve or a longbow, that it's just too tough. And this old guy said, well, yeah, I could hit a paper plate at 40 yards every time. And before then I thought that's just not possible, because I'd tried a recurve and you're just hitting all over the place. But, I never kept at it. I just went out and shot it and couldn't hit anything. And he said, oh yeah, I'd shoot at rabbits at 40. And then, I'd heard that he wanted to hunt with Jim Doherty and Ben Pearson,
oh wow,
it was one of the archery magazines, and we went back and found the article, and Ken Triplett was the guy's name, and I believe they went to Mexico. I don't remember for sure. My brother will kill me for not knowing the details, but a group of 8 or 10 people went, and Ken killed 3 javelina, and nobody else killed one.
Wow!
So he was just a phenomenal hunter, and then he's talking about shooting his recurve at 40 yards, and he had a couple of wing recurves. He had a Thunderbird, 57-pound chaparral, and then a 62-pound Thunderbird. And he gave them to us. Me and our brother each had a recurve bow now, and we took them home and started shooting them, and just decided, if Ken Triplett could do it, I could do it too.
Yeah. And
so 1983, I switched permanently. And I'd tried some the year before. I hunted with that old wing bow, but at some point in 83, I bought a custom-made bighorn takedown bow from Fred Asbell. Fred lived at Longmont, Colorado, and he would come to the Kansas Bowhunters Banquet with a booth selling his bows. And got to know Fred really well. And Danny and I, ended up shooting his bows for years, and bought that takedown bighorn in 83 and killed a deer with it that year. And one of the things that helped me, I was so poor, I had to sell my compound bow to be able to afford to buy a new recurve. Yeah. And so I had no choice. I was either going to kill something with this recurve. I tell people that all the time. Like, you start shooting a recurve, sell your compounds. Yeah. Because the problem is real. And people that listen to the podcast, I've got a compound hanging behind me. But for the first year, I had to get rid of my compound. Yeah. For the first about a year and a half, I didn't own a compound, because the struggle is real with I'm shooting so bad today. Let's just go get the compound. Oh, I get it.
And dude, I heard somebody tell me once, I don't remember who it was. It was Fred Eichler. He said, you want to hunt, you want to kill something with a recurve? Hunt with a recurve.
Yeah.
And if you've got a compound, what you're going to do every time is say, I think I'll take the compound today.
Yeah. And I hate to say this because I know some really good friends have said this, that I'm going to try to shoot a doe with my recurve this year. And okay, but if you really want to get good at it, you have to commit. It's a commitment. And it's not an easy commitment. I guess it could be for some people. Some people are just naturals. They can pick up a bow and
those people make you mad.
Yeah, no kidding. You just hate them. But
I had a buddy call me one time. I hope he listens to this. Well, he built my deck out there. And so I was out practicing shooting my recurve. He's like, dude, that's so cool. I need to get into recurve. I'm like, take this one, man. I said, knock a couple $100 off my deck. You can have this one. And so I gave him a recurve, and he had already told me that he had decided that year he was only going to spot and stalk for whitetails in Kansas.
Good for him. Yeah.
I'm like, that's a pretty tough task.
That is tough. Yeah.
In Kansas, there's only 4 trees. And then I gave him the compact or the recurve. He's like, so I'm only going to hunt with this. I'm like, and you're only going to do you're only going to spot and stalk with a recurve.
Yeah.
In Kansas. And you've had this bow for, 10 minutes. And he calls me first opening day of season. And he spent 2 hours crawling up to this bedded buck in Kansas and shot it with recurve. I'm like, dude, I hate you.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
Anyways, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Some people are naturals, but
yeah. No. So, boy, I struggled with it, but I was committed. And part of the reason was my brother had switched too. And I think we fed off of each other, and we, neither one of us was going to be the first one to give it up. So, just kept at it. And I was fortunate that, there was times in my bow hunting life where I wasn't that good a shot, but I was either persistent enough or in a good enough place. I might miss a couple of shots, but eventually I'd get close enough and make a good shot, and I'd get one. And I was also fortunate too. If I missed, I just totally blew it. It was phenomenal to miss, shoot a foot over its back.
Oh yeah.
And so I wasn't wounding stuff. I just wasn't holding it together long enough to complete the shot process. And I struggled with that forever. And, what do they say? You have to do something 10,000 times before you get good at it. And, if you do it long enough, eventually you get pretty good at it. And, what is it now? 47 years later,
pretty good.
Okay. I still have my phenomenal misses, but it's less than 50% now, when it used to be way more than 50%.
One thing I didn't think about, and that second season, shot a javelina the first season with it, shot a whitetail the second season. That third season, I never considered this. And I shot over the back of a really nice buck, and I shot through the back straps of a doe. Both reasons were because I had never considered, with a compound at full draw, you stop the deer and then you shoot. And so I'd come to full draw and try to stop the deer. Well, then you're trying to rush through your shot process, and it's just a complete different animal.
Right.
Because you don't have any let off. You can't hold a recurve back for that long. And so it's just, that never crossed my mind. So that third season, and that was when I was like, all right, I'm going back I got to kill something. I'm going back to the compound. And I went back to the compound stupidly. I really should have stuck with it. But after missing a really nice buck and hitting a doe, I'm like, all right, the next morning, I'm just going to go kill something with my compound.
Yeah.
And then you don't feel near as good about yourself.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. Yeah, I did. That reminds me of, I was elk hunting in Wyoming, been about 12 years ago, and got real close in on a big bull with some cows, and real thick country on the side of a mountain. And I had a cow call in my mouth, and the cows were walking by it. It was about 18, 19, maybe 20 yards. And there's this little tiny opening, and cow. And here comes the bull. So, I'm going to have to stop him in this opening, and you can't just draw and hold it and wait. Yeah. Right. So I tried to time it to where I came to full draw in the hole. And just as I see him, I squeaked for the cow call. Well, he just instantly stopped, and, he needed to go about that much farther forward. And so I didn't get the shot. Well, and then a cow walks by him. And then when he actually goes through the opening, I don't have the shot. Mm-hmm. And then I stopped him at, 30, 34, 35 yards. And I missed him. So,
yeah. Well, my first elk hunt I ever went on was in that in that 3-year mark, and I was shooting my recurve so much, and I had gotten to that point. I'd shoot squirrels out here in the backyard at 40 yards and just drill them. I was so happy about the way I was shooting, so I took the recurve on an elk hunt. The reason I took the recurve on an elk hunt, so many people are like, this is your first elk hunt ever, and you're choosing a recurve. But I remember telling somebody I would rather shoot a cow with my recurve than a bull with my compound.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, then you need to take your recurve. Like, if it means that much more to you, take your recurve.
Well, and that's what my brother and I used to say back in the day. I'd rather shoot a forked horn with my recurve than a world record with a compound.
Yeah.
And
so did you ever go, after that switch, did you ever go back to a compound?
No, but yes, I kind of did. I bought I booked a Cape buffalo hunt in Africa and was determined to kill a Cape buffalo with a bow. And by this time I couldn't shoot the weight with a recurve. So I went ahead. I want to buy a guy talked me into buying a compound bow. I bought an 85-pound Hoyt compound and took it to Africa. And, I'd like to say I killed a Cape buffalo with my bow. I got close enough several times, but I just never got a shot at a big bull, and killed a bunch of stuff in Africa with that bow. And then there was a point about 6 years after that, I had a brown bear hunt booked, and the week before the hunt, I forgot about had an injured my neck, and I could not anchor my bow. And, this is brown bear. Not only is it a $20,000 hunt, it's a drawing. And, if I don't go, I won't be able to draw for I don't know how long.
Yeah.
And, I thought, well, okay, I'm going to take and to make it worse, the outfitter called 9 days before my hunt and said, hey, the first guy filled out already. If you can get here tomorrow, we can start hunting the next day. And it's like, oh man, I'm just not ready. So I got out that compound bow and started shooting it, and I lowered the weight.
85-pound one?
Yeah, but I lowered it to 70, and I could, you're only anchoring 18 pounds. I could anchor that, but I just couldn't anchor. I was trying to shoot a 60-pound recurve for the big bears at the time. And, so that's, I killed a monster bear with a compound bow. It's the only North American animal I've shot with a compound since 1982.
Now, is this the same bear that charged you on the beach?
Yeah, same one.
Incredible video.
Yeah.
I show people that all the time.
Yeah. So instead of, and the bear got shot in the head by the guide. Mm-hmm. So instead of a Boone and Crockett bear in the record book, I got a great video out of it. So,
yeah.
Well, I guess
now wouldn't it have been like, didn't you tell me it would have been like number 2 all time or something?
No, it would have been top 10 at the time. Okay. 7 or 8.
Still incredible.
He was a monster.
An incredible bear. But yeah, there's a video on YouTube. What do you search to find it?
Luke Randall is the guide. So you just search Luke Randall 2014 bear hunt.
Yeah.
And it'll pop up.
Go watch that video. It's incredible. It's one of those that you see that you're like, man, how does that happen? Then I know one of the guys that it happened to. Before I move on, I do want to just say, I don't tell you this enough. For those of you listening, like I've talked about the men in my life that have, kind of molded my hunting career, and you're one of them.
Oh, thank you.
You were the one that put a recurve in my hand and said, let's, teach you how to shoot this. And of course there have been guys that have helped me after that, but Harv Ebers and Tom Klum, but you were the one that put that bow in my hand and, started getting me going in that direction and started an addiction in me. I'll also say that, and I've told people this, I still say that you're the reason I have a job at Pope and Young. Just meeting you and building that relationship. And so I'm incredibly grateful for you as a friend and a mentor in bow hunting. And, I still call you and bug you with recurve questions when I can't figure one out, but, I am incredibly grateful, for Jim Willems and just a phenomenal guy. That being said, I got into Pope and Young because of you. Okay. Tell me about your journey into Pope and Young?
Well, I've a lot of the stuff I followed on my brother's coattails, or however you say it, because he's 3 years older than me. And so I took over the family farm when I graduated high school, and he took over the other family business, was working in the oil field. The other grandfather was an oil field worker. And
that's all Kansas is farming oil.
Yeah. And because he worked in the oil field, he made a lot more money than I did. And I, being a 18, 19, 20-year-old farmer, I was just poor all the time. And so I was kind of following him when I could, and he drug me along. So he killed his first Pope and Young deer in, I think, 1980. And then I killed my first one in 1981. And of course, I wish it was away now, but back then it was just automatic. If you killed a buck, everybody entered it, because we didn't kill that many. For starters, there weren't that many bow hunters. There weren't that many good bow hunters. And well, not good, but there just weren't that many persistent bow hunters. Guys would get a bow tag because they could and then go out and hunt, but the success rate was way lower than it is now.
And then as soon as it was rifle season, they picked up a rifle.
Yeah. And so Dave Rogers over at El Dorado, which is like 120 miles from my house, he was the closest measurer. And we'd take our deer over and measure them. And then my brother Danny got talking to him about how do you become a measurer. And well, you have to join the Pope and Young Club and all of this. And so long story short, Dan decided he wanted to go to, he joined the Pope and Young Club. The convention was in Phoenix, which isn't that far, or not Phoenix. That was this year. Convention was in Tulsa, which wasn't that far away. So he joined the club and signed up for a measuring clinic for that convention. And I had just recently quit farming and moved to New Mexico to start a different life. And I drove back, I think it was in March, early April.
I guess I didn't realize you moved to New Mexico that long ago.
Yeah, 1987.
Wow.
I was 25 years old.
I guess I thought you spent most of your adult life here and then moved back.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, I farmed for 7 years and just, I was broke the whole time. I never made a penny doing it. And it was the worst time in the world to become a farmer. And had to do something different. I realized that, I can get a job in town, but I'm still going to farm.
Right.
And then I'm just going to work my butt off, and I'm going to lose money here, and I'm never going to have anything. And I was engaged to be married and thought, I need to do something different and make a real living. And the only way I was going to do that was to get off the farm. And the only way I was going to get off the farm is if I just left. And ended up moving to New Mexico, got a job running a sod farm with the guy that owned it. I'd met him hunting elk in New Mexico. And then, then we hunted together in Colorado, and then he came out to Kansas and hunted pheasants with me. And then he offered me a job to run the sod farm, and moved to New Mexico, and, things worked out well and never looked back. And one thing I say, people say, well, why'd you move to New Mexico? Well, it was to get off the farm, but my wife will tell you it was for the bow hunting.
Yeah.
And because I'd go to New Mexico and hunt elk, even though I didn't have much money, I'd hunt Colorado or New Mexico one every year, not both. I couldn't do both. And people don't realize this, but New Mexico has 14 species of big game in their proclamation, counting turkey and javelina. But they have the 3 exotics. They have Barbary sheep and oryx and ibex.
Good news. I think we can drop this now.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, it's official.
Javelina is now a recognized category in Pope and Young.
Yes, it is.
We have not put out the press release yet. We're waiting on minimums to be decided on. But
yeah, we still have a lot of work to do.
It is officially going to be a recognized species in Pope and Young.
Yeah. So if you kill one this fall, you'll be able to enter it. Well, and you can go back and enter anything you've killed.
Anything you got. I think I got one that'll make it.
Oh, good deal.
Depending on, obviously we haven't set the minimums yet, but it's a stud.
Yeah.
All right. And I did shoot it with my bow. So that's the first thing I shot my recurve. So now if I can put it in Pope and Young, it'll be the first time I ever shot the recurve in Pope and Young.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and where were we? My journey in the Pope and Young Club. So, I moved to New Mexico, and New Mexico has 3 species of deer. They have white-tailed cows, deer, and mule deer. And of course, elk, antelope, bighorn sheep, desert bighorn. You add them all up, you get 14 species. Now that sounds great, but today you can't hardly get a tag.
Right. You can't hardly on any of them.
But you apply for them all and hope you get something. And New Mexico had been great to me.
Now, what all of those species can you just buy an over-the-counter tag for as a resident?
Black bear, mountain lion.
That's it?
That's it.
Wow.
And there are, well, that's not necessarily true. You can get a private land only deer tag or elk tag if the ranch is big enough where they've signed up to where they can get it over the counter.
And antelope just changed, 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, they're always changing. But I drew last antelope tag I had in New Mexico was 2002. I haven't drawn an antelope tag since then.
Where do you kill all your antelopes at?
Wyoming or Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah. It's easier to draw. They have more. Yeah. And not Colorado, not necessarily. Well, Colorado still has over-the-counter tags on the Eastern Plains. So
I can't tell you how many people, the reason I asked you about antelope, I can't tell you how many of my friends I've showed that picture of you on a little tripod stand. Oh, yeah. And there's just antelope. And they're like, and I'm like, dude, they never look up and they don't believe me. And I'm like, you want to see proof?
Yeah.
And I pull up your picture and they're like, holy crap, that's how he hunts them. I'm like, yep.
Yeah. 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 And so I've been working on a little project at one of my properties in Kansas. We found a trail there's trees, but it's all just short cedars and hedge trees. And it's going into a kind of a bedding area. And we found a trail crossing the fence. Been trying to get this big buck and he's just elusive. So my brother set up a camera on this trail last fall and then we just kind of forgot about it because there was no stand there. And went back later and said, yeah, that big buck had gone through there pretty regularly, not every day, but that might be a good place to catch him. So you're looking for a place for a tree stand, right? And they're just nothing tall enough. The cedars are 10 foot tall and the hedge trees are 15 feet tall, but they aren't big enough for a tree stand. And neither one of us really like ground blinds. And so I kind of picked a spot. There's a couple of cedars growing around a hedge tree. And I said, I'm going to put a tripod right here. It's just uphill from the trail and make it about 7 or 8 feet tall at the platform. And then you got the trees around you and you can see so much better. That's what I don't like about a ground blind is you're just.
And it's really hard to shoot a recurve out of a ground blind.
It is, yeah.
Either it's too short and you got to turn it weird, or you're worried about your arrow getting over the window, or
and the spot. It's one of those spots where he's going to walk by for 2 seconds and then he's gone. Mm-hmm. So you need to see him coming. And so I built a tripod just for this one particular spot. Dropped it off at my brother's this morning when I drove by, and we'll set it up next week and
sweet
see how it works. You that's just it. If you want to be successful, you just constantly have to think about what can I do? If in this situation, what can I do to make it just that much easier?
Right.
And so it's, it's a tripod, it's this different stands and I don't know, we're really off track. Where did we start?
No, you're fine. This? That's the good thing about a podcast. We can just talk about whatever we want.
No kidding. That is what I love about the podcast, because you just go down rabbit holes one after the other. You never know where you end up.
Yeah, that's why it's fun.
So yeah.
Your journey into Pope and Young. You moved to New Mexico.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So my brother talked me into going to the banquet. And it was one of those deals. I had just moved to New Mexico and I was going to travel through Tulsa going back to Kansas to get another load of stuff moving. And I was working. So I don't even remember what I did, but I got to the Pope and Young banquet on Friday afternoon, probably drove all night, who knows, and spent the weekend there. And it was just so much fun. You know how much fun it is.
Oh, yeah.
And for a 25-year-old kid that was just so into bow hunting and wanted to hunt everything everywhere. And now you're in front of all these people that have hunted everything everywhere, and they're just so nice to you. And it was just such a great adventure. And I was hooked.
I was 26 at my first one. And I remember walking in thinking like, oh my gosh, Tom Miranda. Like, oh my gosh, Jack Frost. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you realize like these dudes have accomplished everything, but they want to talk to you about your last hunt just as much as you want to hear about their last hunt. Yeah. And it's like, man, this is just a really cool community.
Oh, it is. Yeah. So 1987, Fred Bear was a keynote speaker.
Oh, wow.
And it was his last Pope and Young convention before he passed away. So I got to meet Fred Bear, and everybody's taking bows up for him to sign. And I didn't have anything with me, I didn't have a bow with me, but it was pretty cool. I stood in line and then I just talked to him for a few minutes and walked on, but it was a great time. But yeah, the Pope and Young convention, at the time, I met Bob Folkrod there. He was putting out videos of Quebec caribou hunts. And that was really in the infancy of hunting videos. And I don't even remember where you saw him. I suppose, they advertised a video and somebody bought one for $50, and then we all went over to his house and watched it. But really, really cool videos. I got to meet him. Charlie Kroll, Fred Bear's son-in-law, worked for Bear Archery forever. And,
just inducted in the Hall of Fame this last convention.
Yeah. And then of course the Pope and Young people, Fred Asbell, Jim Doherty, and, from back then, just, it was so cool. But, now I'm a member and now I'm hooked. Right. So I signed up to be a measurer, and back in the day, if there was a measurer in your hometown, they typically didn't want another one. And so they wouldn't put me in a class.
Because your brother had already.
No, I was living in New Mexico there.
But
there was a guy that lived there that was part of the, he actually had a job for the Pope and Young Club. So they didn't want to piss him off because he's a major. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of bided my time waiting. And, I didn't really have the time off to go do it anyhow. And there's some expense to it. So just waiting, and then talking to the local guy, Bob Stevens, a good friend of mine. He was the major, and he was the publisher of the magazine at the time. And he said, Jim, why aren't you a major? Because I'd take my stuff over to him. And he said, well, I signed up 3 or 4 years ago, and they don't seem to want to put me in a class. And then I found out, well, Bob didn't really want to do it anymore. He'd had about enough of it. And so he called up probably Glenn Heisey at the time and said, hey, Glenn, I'd like to sponsor Jim to get in the next class. And I got in the next class.
There you go.
So I've been a major since 92 and go to as many conventions as I can. And it's just part of my life.
Guys, I absolutely love arrows. I'm an arrow enthusiast, an arrow junkie, if you will. Let me tell you why I love Deer Crossing Archery. I love Deer Crossing Archery for several reasons. They give me a phenomenal arrow at a great price. They custom build your arrows. So if you go on their website, if you're not an arrow builder, you can go on their website. You can select your vein colors. You can select your wrap colors, your knot colors. You can select the length you want your arrows cut to, what kind of outserts you want, total overall arrow weight, FOC. You can build all that on the website and get the exact arrow for you. Arrows are not one size fits all. We all have different needs, and Deer Crossing Archery, they understand that. So I can select my shaft. I can select, what ethics kit I want on that, what weight I want it cut to, what length I want the arrow cut to. It's a one-stop shop for building my arrows online. However, they simply just build really good arrows at a phenomenal price. Let me tell you about my favorite arrow. My favorite arrow is the Rupture Pro. Reason being, it's a phenomenal 204 diameter arrow at an unbeatable price. Again, I can get that with an ethics kit straight out of the box, so I can figure out what weight I want to run out front. I can get my FOC just right. That arrow is a perfect arrow for my recurves. I can tune them really well with that because, again, I can work with that ethics system. If I don't want to change all my broadheads out, I can work with that ethics system to really tune that arrow good to my bow. But they also just perform really, really, really well out of my compound. I have shot 12 animals now with a Rupture Pro. I just love the arrow. It's a phenomenal arrow build. And again, it's not going to break the bank. Guys, go to deercrossingarchery.com. Use code TYPICAL, all caps, TYPICAL, to save you some money on your order. But I promise you, you will not be disappointed when you build a set of arrows at Deer Crossing Archery. Go check them out. For those of you that don't know, Jim served as president of Pope and Young. You're now on the board of Pope and Young as past president. Past president holds a board position. Right. So how did you go from measure in 92 to head honcho?
So yeah, that's a tough one as well. A good friend of mine, Scott Hargrove, he met this is just a rabbit hole you ask.
Go for it.
He met a biologist in Arizona when he was cows deer
coming back for another 2 hours.
Yeah, we got all kinds of time. So anyhow, Scott Hargrove met a biologist in Arizona. His name was Emil. I can't remember his last name. I can picture his face. But Emil was working on a jaguar protection project in Mexico. And Emil he's a longbow shooter. Scott met him and he was talking to Scott. He said, yeah, we have these ranches, remote ranches way out in the middle of nowhere. They're just too far away for outfitters to mess with because they're too hard to get to. And he said, we need to figure out how to get some hunters down there to help pay. If I bring in the hunters and they see it's part of the project, that bring in money that helps us keep the jaguars alive. And so Scott I don't know, it was probably about 8 of us. The first hunt went down there. Scott talked me into going, and it just sounded like such an adventure. That was time in my life. I was, I think I'd already retired. I believe so. And it was one of those points when anybody come up with something is like, yeah, I'm going.
Yeah.
Jim, let's do it. Yeah, I'm going.
I'm in.
But they just sounded like an adventure. And I hadn't killed a cow's deer yet, even though they have them in New Mexico. I'd been hunting mule deer closer to home because, you know, when you're working and family and the whole bit, you tend to pick the hunts that you can do on the weekends. So anyhow, we go down there and we do this hunt, and I realized right off, you know, if I do this 2 or 3 years in a row, I will have a big cow's deer. And so the next year, a Pope and Young guy took it over, Dirk Dietrich, and he signed up a bunch of hunters, and we made it a bigger hunt. And then I don't remember why Dirk wanted to drop out. Well, I know why. Dirk got elected to a board position, and they were trying to start up Pope and Young special hunts, trying to make it a part of the club where you can go as a group and hunt various things. So I took that over, the special hunt part, and I ran that hunt. We had 26 hunters in 1 year in one group. Go down there and hunt.
Back.
Maybe. I've been thinking about it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So anyhow,
sign us up for the first 2. We'll take the first 2 spots.
Yeah. So with the biologists working down there, Emil moved on to something else, and then Ron and Kyle Thompson took it over, and they were part of it from the beginning, but they kind of took over the part where we dealt with Ron and Kyle. And Ron was a old time biologist from Arizona, worked for the state of Arizona, and I say old time, he's retired now. And his son Kyle, I guess he's more of a freelance biologist. He works kind of independently and does private contracts. But anyhow, Kyle's a fluent Spanish. He speaks fluent Spanish. So I took over the management of the hunt to where I would gather up the hunters, and then we'd meet Ron and Kyle at the border, and we'd all cross and go have our hunt. We ended up staying in 5 different ranches at one time. And we had some. I
was told though, if you only charge those guys $50 more, your hunt's paid for. You know.
Well, you know, that is kind of the benefit of doing things like that. You tend to get stuff cheaper. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Hey, I told somebody, they said, how do you afford to elk hunt?
Yeah.
And I said, let me tell you something. You call a guide and you say, hey, I'm going to fill your camp.
Yep.
What's the best price you can give me?
Yeah.
Usually they'll knock $1,000 off.
Oh yeah.
$1,200 off.
Yeah. Because they're paying somebody to help fill those spots. And it might as well be you. So,
right.
So yeah, there's that. And so anyhow, and I ended up killing a great cow's deer the second year down there. And there was always a few extra tags. 1 year I killed 2 and had some great hunts. But, you know, once again, nothing ever lasts.
Yeah.
Nothing lasts forever. And you know, I kind of blame it on the Jaguar project. They quit, you know, they quit poisoning jaguars is what they were doing. The ranchers were poisoning them. They'd find a dead calf that looked like a mountain lion kill or a jaguar kill, and they'd put poison on it. Whatever came back to eat it died. So they quit doing that, and they quit any predator control. So a combination of explosion of predators. The javelina got distemper and wiped them out. And so now the mountain lions and jaguars, all they have to eat is either cattle or deer. And then we had a pretty bad drought go through there, and the deer population just went way down. And, you know, it got to where it just wasn't a good enough hunt anymore to justify going down there. But, you know, it got me hooked, and I'm on my 5th ranch now, since in the past 16 years.
And you just shot a really nice one this year.
I shot a really nice one in January. Yeah, I try to go to Mexico every year.
Yeah.
People don't realize how good the opportunity is down there right now.
Right.
And, you know, a little bit of it is because of the bad reputation. Everybody's scared to go down there. They're afraid you're going to get killed, but that just leaves more for me.
Yeah.
But it's a good time to hunt Mexico. They're doing a really good job with their deer management, and they're managing it for American hunters.
Yeah.
You know, fixing up bunkhouses, giving us places to stay. They have the stands and the blinds there when you get there.
What's a Mexico cow's deer hunt? If somebody heard that and they're like, man, I could do that. What's something like that cost?
probably on the low end about 5,500 and on the high end about 8,000. And I don't know if you can do it for 55 anymore, but
and that's all in and done. That's your lodging, that's your tags.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, you just have to get there. There may be a transportation fee. The ones that are on the cheaper end will always have smaller deer, and maybe not as many deer. The expensive ones are ranches that are known for big deer and fewer hunters. And you have a better opportunity at a big buck. And I've just kept doing it until I found a ranch that I really like. And like I said, it's not going to last. At some point I'll lose it.
Right.
Something will happen, but I want to do it every year while I can.
Yeah. So how did you get from organizing the Pope and Young hunts to president of the whole shebang?
So, so the Pope and Young Club has 4 elected directors. They're called directors, and there's actually 13 people on the board of directors for Pope and Young Club, and of those 13, you have the president, the past president, you have 2 vice presidents, you have the first vice president, second vice president. So there's 4, and then you have the 4 directors that are elected, and then there's 5 appointed positions who are basically heads of committees, like the records committee and the membership committee. And those are the ones that they're appointed because they're expected to work, where the directors are expected to lead. And so a director position came up, and, it's political, and I'd been a little bit political with the club, and I kind of knew what was going on. I wanted to be part of the board, and, decided I'm going to run for a director spot. And, there's 2 spots come up every 2 years. And so it's a 4-year position. And it was looking like there was 2 other guys running that were more popular in the club, had name recognition that I didn't have. And I thought, well, I'm going to run to get my name out there. I'm probably not going to win. And, a couple of guys said, yeah, you need to run for president. You're a businessman. You've been doing other stuff with local clubs and whatnot. And I was like, yeah, I'm just not well known enough.
What year was this?
2010. No,
because you were president when
14.
I met you.
2014. Sorry, 14.
So you weren't on the board at all until
no.
You went from not on the board to president.
Yeah, my only exposure had been the head of the special hunts.
Wow.
And yeah. So I just wanted to get on the board and be part of it, and just however I can help out. And long story short, there was a little bit of turmoil in the club at the time, and some people were ready for a change, and I just hit it at the right time, and made a ton of phone calls, sent out a ton of letters, and I was elected president. 2014. I served 3 2-year terms, so I was president for 6 years.
Yeah. When we that's how we met. I got a phone call from a buddy of mine, and they said, "Hey, the president of Pope and Young is in your hometown bow hunting. You should have him on at that time it was the Bear Archery podcast, of course." He said, "You should have him on the podcast." And I'm like, "Okay." And we became friends. So now let's get into the nitty gritty.
Okay.
You entered the board in 2014. And like you said, there was turmoil in the club at the time. Now, before we move on, I just want to note, Pope and Young is not I don't know the term I want to use here. Pope and Young is not a political party. Pope and Young is not Pope and Young is a group of bow hunters that fight for the rights of other bow hunters.
Absolutely.
And I'll say this. I did a video just a few days ago saying that you don't have to have any animals in the book to be a member of Pope and Young. For so long, and I'll be honest, in my interview, I said this. I said, I always thought Pope and Young was just a measuring system. I always thought it was just a book. I always thought it was to be able to brag that my deer is bigger than yours, or, I've got more in the books than you. But then you really learn, and like I said, that first convention changed my life. I mean, it really did. Because then you learn Pope and Young stands for so much more than just a number in a book. Pope and Young is not just about, and I was telling somebody just the other day, about why the record books even exist in the first place. I'm like, it's not for you to brag. It was created so that we could give you bow hunting rights.
Right. Statistics.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Pope and Young, the record book was started, Glenn St. Charles and his group of thug friends, wanted to bow hunt. Well, it wasn't legal in a lot of states. And so they started collecting data points using the Boone and Crockett system to be able to take to other states and show that bow hunting is a ethical means of harvesting big game. And this is why you should accept this, because in Kentucky or whatever the states were, look how many deer were killed last year that were, this big, archery equipment.
Right.
And so Pope and Young is the voice for each and every bow hunter. If you're a bow hunter, you belong to Pope and Young. I don't care if this is your first season ever bow hunting. I don't care if you're just a backyard bow hunter in Alabama and you think, well, my biggest deer is 100 inches. I mean, it doesn't matter. We are your voice as bow hunters. So you belong to Pope and Young. That being said, you said there was some turmoil in the club. What have you seen change since you've been, on the board and involved at that level?
Yeah. So the changes are really pretty minor, but one of the big issues, well, let's just go back. Before I got involved in the board, the big issue of the day was let off, compound bow let off. Of course, way back it would have been compound period. Back in the late 60s when they invented the compound and started selling them.
Which is when the club was, in its infancy.
Yeah. We were only 10 years old when all that happened. And, I just can't imagine the conversations that went on because of that. But ultimately, the club accepted compound bows pretty early on.
But of course, Fred was involved with
Fred
the club
Bear
heavily at the time.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, he was on the board. Maybe not at that particular time, but he had been previous to that. He was on the board in the 60s.
And at this time, Shepley was a member involved with the club. I don't know that he was ever on the board, but
he wasn't. So that's also part of the controversy. Pete Shepley was a force. Back in the 80s, he was hunting all over the world and having world records. He was the new Fred Bear. But there was people within the club that, thought he was too popular, too powerful. And it's a club. It's a close knit group of people. Eventually they forced Pete Shepley out of the club, which looking back would give us a black eye, but that's in the past. There's nothing we can do about that now.
And we did beautifully honor him at this last convention. Yeah. Which I thought was just so, the Pioneer Award. Right. As soon as I heard about that, I was thrilled we were doing that.
Yeah. But, looking back at the time, it just seemed like Pete Shepley being who he was taking the club in a direction that the majority of the members didn't want to go.
Right.
And so, ultimately they forced him out or he quit or whatever it worked out. But anyhow, we've made amends since then. But then after the compound bow, then there's let off. For years we had, you couldn't have over 50% let off. Well, pretty soon all the bows you're buying are 60 and 70%. Are we going to keep up with the times, or are we going to dictate that you can only shoot a 50% let off bow? And this would have been 90s, early 2000s, somewhere in there. But I remember being at a meeting at one of the conventions, and the membership actually voted to not accept over 50% let off in the record books. And all of a sudden, half the animals killed with a compound bow were ineligible for the record book. And the board ended up making the decision a few years later to accept it, which was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But because
you can't even find a bow that's 50%.
Yeah, exactly. But since the membership had voted not to, a ton of people quit because of it, pissed off and quit, which, were you that dedicated to the club? That just grinds me when people quit over. I just don't
Can't
agree
take
with
the ball and
this.
go home.
Oh man, that makes me mad.
On this point, I got a phone call from a guy the other day, and he didn't like something that the club was doing, and he said, "I just don't even know if I'm going to renew." I said, honestly, that's the wrong mindset.
Yes, it
is.
He
said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, if you're a part of the club, then your voice matters.
Yep.
But if you're not a part of the club, who cares what you think?"
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we do care, but not nearly as much.
Right. And
it's like a politician from Wyoming. He kind of cares what a Kansan thinks, but you call him up and say, "Don't vote on this." He doesn't vote for me. So.
Right. Well, on this, it was about, kind of an inner part of Pope and Young. And I said, if you want to be a part of the club and you want to share change and help the direction of the club, that has to be from the inside.
Yeah.
said, so just because something's happening that you don't like doesn't mean you quit. I said, that just means you submit a letter and you say, hey, this is my thought. Why don't we consider this? And because you're a part of the club, that carries weight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, be part of the change.
Yeah.
Or be part of the process. And
right.
The same thing with NRA. People quit NRA because they supported crossbows in the bow hunting season, which, I hate. I don't like that at all. But it's the NRA. Just look at what they've done for us as hunters and as gun owners, and just flat out as Constitution-loving Americans. You have to belong to the NRA. Yeah. I don't care how much they piss you off. They do so much good. It outweighs the bad. And that's one of the problems over the years you have with a club like the Pope and Young Club. A lot of times the turmoil is just kind of in the hierarchy, and the membership doesn't really see it. And it's almost always revolves around direction of the club. And it's always, for the most part, very minor direction changes. Some people think, we need to go left here a little bit or right here a little bit. And other people say, no, we're not changing. And I hit it at the perfect time when the majority of the members wanted the club to do a few things differently, primarily be a little more proactive toward membership. And one of the controversies at that time was the lighted nocks. Mm-hmm. And, everybody on television used lighted nocks because of the visual, and hunters used lighted nocks. And it got to the point where we really couldn't defend. Well, we're all about fair chase. Does it affect fair chase or not? And the only thing people can come up with was, well, it'll allow people to shoot later at night than they normally would. And no, if they're going to shoot at night, they're going to shoot at night. Yeah. So that was kind of one of the controversies. And even being a traditional guy, I was for being more proactive and anticipating some of the technological issues and make the switch to make them legal before we were forced to do it, just because of the sheer numbers. And I hope that's kind of my legacy with the club, is we've kind of changed proactive instead of reactive.
And I'll say that there are so many people I talk to about Pope and Young, and they won't join, or they have a bad taste because of technology. Sure. Now, let me just say this. Maybe that's too harsh. The same reasons you don't like Pope and Young, buddy, you'd be in a bad place if there were nobody to be the voice of ethics behind technology, because then anything that's introduced is just accepted. Anything that's introduced is just passed. Go ahead, shoot it.
Yeah.
Just this last year, they introduced a holographic bow sight, or a night vision bow sight, whatever.
Yeah.
To literally shoot at night.
Yeah.
If there is not a voice that is representing the bow hunting community that can go before legislation and say this is 100% unethical, well then good luck, buddy, because they're just going to accept everything. So I understand, and I can say this. I mean, you're a board member, so if I get in trouble, I'll edit it out. I understand sometimes we're slow on making changes. I understand, maybe we should have changed lighted sights 15 years ago. I understand that. However, I would much rather be on the side of being a little slow than the side of saying, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason things like that are hard to change within the club, is because you don't want a knee-jerk reaction. But, no matter what you're doing, bow hunting is a privilege. It's not a right. We have a right to do certain things, but hunting with a bow and arrow isn't really a right. It's a privilege. Right. And with every privilege, there has to be lines in the sand. And some privileges, there might be thousands of lines. But one of the analogies I've used back in the day of just anything goes. Look at baseball. We aren't really a sport, but baseball is a sport. But at the professional level, it's not really a sport. Steroid use just about destroyed baseball. It gave them such a black eye, and eventually they did the right thing and they banned it. But if they hadn't banned it, would we have given up on baseball by now? Well, probably not. We'd still watch it, but it was damaged so much by that controversy and illegal activity and quite frankly unethical activity. We have to, in order to keep our privilege, we have to have lines in the sand to where we're doing things that are socially acceptable. And that's what's great about the Pope and Young Club and Boone and Crockett Club. We're all revolve around fair chase hunting.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we are and who we are. So it's just a matter of, is it fair chase or is it not?
Right.
Does it slightly help the hunter, give us a slight advantage, or is it a huge advantage? And there's some things that are just obvious. There's lines in the sand, spotlighting deer. We're not going to do that. That right. should be illegal. Some state comes along and says, well, we're going to let you shoot deer at night.
Speaking of that, I got a juicy question for you.
We have to say, no, we're not going to allow it. So go ahead.
I got a bad one for you here. You might get in trouble for answering this. Why does Pope and Young not allow drone recovery?
At this point, we do.
We do.
Because we don't disallow it. We have a policy, and okay, let me step back a bit. Our policy is related to taking of game with a drone, using a drone for scouting, using a drone for hunting purposes.
Correct.
That's our written policy. And I might get in a little bit of trouble here, but because we don't have an official policy on game recovery, at this point, it's accepted.
So I was in the truck with two other board members just recently, and they were having this debate. One of the board members, much younger, tatted up with sexy hair. That's all I need to say. Mm-hmm. And, he was saying that from an ethics standpoint, why would we not do absolutely everything we can do to recover that animal?
Yeah.
If I've hit that animal, why would I not exhaust everything I could ever exhaust to do this? And the other board member made the point of, well, the difference between drones and dogs, and I do understand this part. If I have a blood dog, there is some sportsman skills and work that have went into training that dog.
Yeah. Whereas
with a drone, you're simply just relying on technology.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
But I do understand.
Yeah.
Well, I understand Scott's standpoint too of
sure.
Why not do everything? Like if I've found blood, I've wounded this animal, why not do everything I can possibly do to find that animal?
Yeah, I get that. I understand that mindset. The counter to that is it socially acceptable? How does it make us look?
Yeah.
Is it better for us to not recover that animal or to recover it any means possible? I don't want to say that it's going to be 100%
right. No,
accepted, but we are having a conversation.
Yeah.
And until we ban it, it's okay. And really some of this stuff is on a case by case basis. We have a records committee. Mm-hmm. You send in a record entry and you say, okay, we recovered it with a drone. First thing you look at is it legal in your state?
Yeah.
If it's not legal in your state, we can't take it. If it's legal in the state, okay, is this legit? Did he use the drone to find the dead deer, or did he use the drone to help him hunt and scout it? And there's so many variables, and it's really hard to write a policy that covers that. That's why we don't have it yet. We're just hashing it all out. But I was involved with a lot of other organizations because I was president of the club when drones first came out. There was some other organizations really pushed to make hunting with drones illegal, and they wanted help with the Pope and Young Club and probably Boone and Crockett. So I had conversations with a lot of people on this, helping write legislation that would work state to state. And so this would have been really early when I was president, probably 15 or 16. But we got a lot of states to put in legislation that says you cannot use a drone for hunting, which is, you shouldn't. It makes us look bad.
The recovery of it.
It may or may not. Some states it may, but when we were working on this at the time, it really was for scouting and actually guiding a hunter to an animal. Those are the two things that are unacceptable.
Well, on the question of ethics, and I heard you put this so well one time. I don't remember if it was on a podcast or in a meeting, but I heard you put this so well one time. The question of ethics is always a personal, like you have to have this conversation personally.
Right.
Now there is a standard of ethics. I don't have to have like you said, I don't have to have the conversation personally if it's right or wrong to spotlight a deer. it's wrong.
Right.
Like I can't come up with anything there. But the topic that you were talking about was cellular trail cameras. And you said, so you mean to tell me if I get a picture of a buck you said I have a cellular trail camera on my driveway.
Right.
And if a buck walks by that in June and I just happen to get a picture of him, I can't kill him in November. How is that unethical?
Right.
And I remember being challenged by that, not because I thought cellular trail cameras were unethical, but just that everything we do as sportsmen has to come down to a personal question of ethics.
Absolutely.
That being said, Pope and Young's standpoint on cellular trail cameras is that if you're not using them to hunt in real time,
right,
just like a radio, otherwise I can't get a picture of a buck and then go to the tree stand, see a picture of a buck on feeder A and drive out there and shoot him.
Right.
It's illegal.
Right.
Same with not illegal, unethical. Same with using radios. Like I can use a radio on a hunt, but I can't use them in real time if Jim's on the top of the mountain and saying, go left, the bull's, down here.
And that is an issue. There are, especially out west, it really doesn't matter for whitetails, the way they are, radio is not going to help you one bit. But there are people that will not hunt a deer or an elk or an antelope without a earbud in their ear and somebody on the hill glassing and guiding them into it. And that's not fair chase. That's not that. Talk about an unfair advantage. That gives you an unfair advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the lines in the sand. Somebody has to do it. Mm-hmm. And you can dislike it all you want, but it has to be there.
Yeah.
And if you really dislike it, get involved and help make the changes and just get to the point where you have somebody you can call and say, hey, I don't like this. Yeah. Or what you're doing isn't right. And that's how we are America.
And that's my point of it all is if you're a passionate bow hunter and there's things you dislike about Pope and Young, join Pope and Young and help us. Like,
absolutely.
The more voices we have, the better. And I remember somebody, a comment on Facebook that said, oh yeah, sight lights weren't accepted until Scott, which many people know is the owner of Dialed Archery, until Scott joined as a board member. And I remember somebody else commenting and saying,
I can tell you that had absolutely nothing to do with it.
But what I'm getting to is I remember somebody commenting and saying, Dialed is one of the only sights that doesn't come with a sight light. I mean, I've got 2 Dialeds here and neither of them have a light on them because they don't come with one and I'm not spending the extra $50 to get one.
Yeah.
But I remember another person comment and saying, so what you mean is that somebody from the industry joined the club and brought light to the situation.
Yeah.
Shedded some light on the situation.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, that's what we are.
That's how it works. Yeah.
100% that's what we are. But the more voices we have, the better decision we're going to make.
Yeah. But the lighted sight conversations have been going on for 20 years.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I'm sure Scott wasn't even bow hunting when we first started talking about it.
I remember when I first came on board, I've been to 3 conventions now, so it has to be 6 years. I remember it was just on the verge of we're about to accept lighted sights. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And now 6 years later, we finally did it.
But, it's 6 years. That's on the verge for the Pope and Young Club.
And again, guys, like I understand that is the frustration for some people is that things happen slow and it should have happened years ago. But I want you to understand, we don't take these things lightly.
Right.
We don't just whimsically make choices and decisions. We want to look at things and really know how is this going to affect the future of bow hunting before we make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And another reality of a club like this is some of the older guys that grew up not using that stuff tend to be more opposed to it than the people that use it. And sometimes it takes attrition to get enough of the people that don't like it out and enough people that do want it in.
It's hard to teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah. And what it really comes down to is when you have the final argument, you have to say, does it affect fair chase or not? Mm-hmm. And if you can honestly say it does affect fair chase, then you have to quantify, is it a little bit unfair or is it a lot unfair?
Okay, so just to make it a little worse on you, what do you say to the people who think of the ethics of bow hunting differently? And if it gives us an advantage, it's more ethical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because then we're killing the animal the most ethically that we can. Which, again, there's some argument to that.
Yeah.
However, we are bow hunters.
Well, there's a difference between ethical and fair.
Bingo.
And yeah, most
Which is
efficient.
why our sentence specifically says ethical, fair chase bow hunting.
The most efficient 30-06. So are we going for efficiency, or are we going for, bow hunting is a thing. Bow hunting has always been a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we want it to remain a thing.
Yeah.
And that's why hardcore bow hunters are opposed to crossbows in archery season, because it's not bow hunting anymore. It's not a bow. It's a crossbow. Right. There's different as a muzzleloader and a rifle. And they're definitely different. And, if the Game and Fish decides that we have enough deer, we can warrant having crossbows in the season, then okay, that's acceptable. But
100%.
As Pope and Young Club, our goal is to say, okay, if you do that, we want separate licensing, separate education, because it's different. And the only way you'll know if it's hurting or helping our cause is if you have the statistics.
For those of you that can't wrap your mind around this, for those of you that are so bitter about Pope and Young's against my crossbow use, first off, no, we're not against your crossbow use. We're against your crossbow use in the bow hunting seasons.
Right.
But secondly, it's the same reason I can't walk into Vegas and say, hey, I'm here to shoot and bring a crossbow.
Yeah.
Because it's a different stinking weapon.
It's totally different. Yeah.
I can't walk up and shoot against Levi Morgan and pull out a crossbow.
No.
You can't do it.
Can't do it.
Why? Because it's a different stinking weapon.
Yeah. And, I guess it's all in the past, but if organizations like the Pope and Young Club had really known what was going to happen, if we had come in and said, okay, we'll accept crossbows in our bow season, but no telescopic sight, and make it more of a traditional type weapon instead of basically a rifle that slings an arrow at
the fact that my son is 6 years old. And the fact that I can take him out without any practice and within 10 minutes he can shoot a crossbow 50 yards.
Yeah.
That tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, it does. And there's places where if they're not killing enough deer, they want to open 100%. It up some more. Yeah.
And I heard Justin say that so beautifully. Justin was like, listen, I understand that there's counties in, the South or in the East, and they literally just need deer killed by the gourds because they can't kill enough. So be it. Have at it. But you want to look at out west where, like you said, you haven't had an antelope tag since 2002. Guarantee you're going to be pissed off if a dude draws an antelope tag and goes in there and shoots one with a crossbow day one at 97 yards.
During the bow season? Absolutely. Okay, I got to call you out on something.
Go ahead.
I think I told you, but you had, it's been a couple of months ago, but you said Arizona instituted a crossbow ban.
Did I?
Yeah, on your podcast.
I don't think you have called me out on this.
Oh, okay, so I probably didn't. I called you out on some of the cooking stuff, but anyhow,
I need to be called out on that.
Arizona did not institute a crossbow ban. Arizona codified their rulings on how you can use a crossbow during a bow hunt, because what Arizona was a lot of states, they come out and said, okay, if you have a handicap permit, you can hunt with a crossbow. And in Arizona, it's kind of like getting a medical marijuana tag. You can get any doctor to say, okay, you're handicapped, you can shoot a crossbow now. So it got to the point where a huge number of people were using the handicap issue to just so they could hunt during the bow season with a crossbow with a scope and shoot 100 yards and the whole bit. So they didn't ban crossbows. They just verified the intention of the original law to make they made it to where you actually have to be legally disabled to hunt with a crossbow during the bow season, and not just a note from the doctor that says my shoulder hurts. And
I wonder where I heard that from. Because I don't even remember saying it.
Well, yeah.
Who was that? No.
Just a matter of choice of words. It wasn't a ban.
Well, and that's what I always tell people. Like, there are hardcore bow hunters that, say you lose an arm. I'd rather just not hunt than hunt with a crossbow.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah.
However, listen, I do understand, and I'm not stupid enough to say if somebody goes and fights for my country and they lose a limb, no, I don't want them to come back and say, well, I can't hunt because I can't shoot a compound. However, it should still be in a rifle season, in my opinion.
Or a separate season.
Or a separate, even like a muzzleloader.
Yeah.
Because my dad's getting to that age and he wrestled his whole life and his shoulders are just tore up and he has trouble drawing his compound back. I would much rather see my dad have to shoot a compound than not be able to hunt.
Yeah. Oh, I get that. I get all of those.
Right.
We just go about it wrong. It's the problem. At the very least, separate licensing. It's a crossbow tag as opposed to a bow tag, and separate education, because it's
different seasons.
Hunting education. Well, different seasons would be great, absolutely. But there's places where they can be side by side. But you have states that allow basically unlimited crossbow use during the bow season. Within 5 years, half of the bow hunters shoot a crossbow, and it's hard to say, but what's the biggest threat to bow hunting in the United States? Well, if you lose half of your participants in a 5-year period, you have to say that's a pretty big threat to your sport, to your what you're fighting for. And I understand that for some people, they're older, it's harder to shoot, but I go back to a conversation I had with a guy that I found out he was hunting elk with a crossbow, and I didn't even realize it was legal. It's been a while in New Mexico. And then I found out, well, you can get a handicap tag, sticker, permit, whatever, and you can hunt with them. And he'd killed elk with a crossbow. And I was talking to him. I said, well, what happened to you? And he says, well, I can only shoot 55 pounds with my compound, and I won't hunt elk with under 55 pounds. You're kidding me, right? And I knew he never really was a bow hunter. He was always one that would cut corners, but you can shoot a 55-pound compound, but you're disabled enough you can't hunt elk without a crossbow, and that really pissed me off.
Yeah. Wow. So just so everybody knows, just to kind of put a bow on this, where does Pope and Young stand on crossbows? Well, at the last convention, we came out and made a statement that we understand that it is a legal and ethical means of harvesting big game. However, it is a different weapon than a bow. Will Pope and Young ever accept crossbows into the record books? No, because it is a different weapon. Same reason we won't accept muzzleloaders or rifles. Crossbows do have their own record books. You can put them in Bolt and Coral,
right,
or in Boone and Crockett,
right.
Our measures can measure for Bolt and Coral if they so choose. They don't have to. But if somebody brings them a deer, they can measure for that. But we understand that it is a legal and ethical means of harvesting big game. But it's the same reason we don't accept a 30-06. It is a different weapon. They should have their own tags, seasons, dates, regulations, rules, laws, and training.
Absolutely.
That is our standpoint.
All separate.
And I, as much as I would like for my dad to, in the same situation where if my dad could no longer pull a compound back, as much as I would like for him to be able to shoot a crossbow, I also don't want him to have 2.5 months to do it because my dad is a body stacker and it would just get that much worse.
Well, and that's the main issue for separate licensing. When they allow crossbows, the success rate goes way up.
100%.
We go from 30% to 45%. And that's all crossbows. And if you're in a place, well, New Mexico, for instance, where I haven't had an antelope tag for 20 years, bow hunters, real bow hunters that hunt with a bow and arrow, their success is 20% per year. You have 100 tags. They know you're going to kill 20 antelope. We can give 100 tags. And then you allow crossbows, and then all of a sudden you have 100 tags are killing 50 antelope. Well, next year you're only going to get 50 tags because or 40, and it affects the opportunity for bow hunters. And the Pope and Young Club is for bow hunters. Yeah. We don't, we're not here to fight for the crossbow hunters. We are here to fight for the bow hunters. And if 100%. We see something that affects bow hunters, we need to talk about it.
Somebody asked me one time, and they said, why should it be different? And I said, and I showed him a picture of my property, and I showed him where my blind was, and I showed him, lay this out for him. And I said, because, and I don't remember the number. I had it exact at the time. I said, because 8 different times this season, I would have already shot a Pope and Young sized animal.
Yeah.
If I could shoot it, because it was at 60 yards.
Yeah.
Because it was at, 49 yards, because it was at, whatever. So my success rate, and at that time I still hadn't tagged out on the year yet. But I said, because I would have been done day one.
Yeah.
of archery season if I could use a crossbow.
Yeah,
but because I'm using a compound, I'm still hunting.
Yeah, it's different. It's easier and it's different, and there's just so many things different about it. It has to be different, separate.
So we've talked about the changes in Pope and Young. Before we wrap up, what do you anticipate the next changes in Pope and Young being?
Oh man, I wish you'd have given me some warning on that.
Javelina.
Javelina is a kind of a big surprise. That one snuck up on us because people's been talking about it for as long as I can remember, 25 years. Mm-hmm. Javelina and wolf, the two species they want to add to it, and we work really closely with the Boone and Crockett Club.
Why hasn't wolf been added?
Politics. Politics. That's it. Politics.
Will it be added?
Here's how it works, and you probably talked about it with Javelina. If a couple of game and fish departments, state organizations or state departments come up and say, we have seasons for this animal now, and we would like you to recognize them as a big game animal.
Yeah.
Then that holds a lot of weight. That's how Javelina got added. Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and Mexico, all four wrote letters to the Boone and Crockett Club, and a couple of the states sent people and gave a presentation and saying, we would love to see this officially be a big game animal. And
if you want to hear more on that, we actually had Jim Heffelfinger come to the convention. And we had him on a few episodes ago to talk about the dire wolf, but we did talk about the Javelina, and he was one of those fish and game biologists that came and gave those supporting documents.
Right.
And so if you want to hear, more of that, he did share some of that on the podcast, but
yeah. So wolf would be the same way if the game and fish departments wanted it to be a big game and
a managed big game species.
Big game, yeah. And there's I'm not sure why, someplace like Alaska or British Columbia or whatever hasn't come to us before and said, we'd love to see this, but now there's so much politics involved and people either love wolf introduction or they hate it. And going back to, I talked about Ron and Kyle Thompson. Ron was he's retired game biologist from Arizona. He was involved with the Mexican red wolf, or Mexican wolf reintroduction in Arizona and New Mexico, and sitting around camp with him. Why not? And one night, and he said, Jim, why, wolves used to be here. Why are hunters so opposed to having wolves brought back on the landscape? And I said, it's because you lied to us. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, Yellowstone, as soon as we reach 150 wolves, we'll start managing them. You reach 150, we're going to manage them. Well, they sue us, and they sue the wildlife department, and then it's 300. And okay, we're going to manage them. Now it's 400. Now in the lawsuit, you said at some point we're going to manage the population. We're going to control the population. And now there's so many of them, there's hardly any elk left, and we still can't manage them. And you people promised us that we could manage them, and we don't manage them. We just let them run wild and do whatever they want. And of course, outside of Yellowstone, the state of Wyoming is doing some management, but it's so political. We would rather not, I hate to say it, rather not see a single wolf than deal with what we're dealing with right now. And Colorado, forced introduction. All you have to do is wait 10 years and there are going to be plenty of wolves there. But now they catch the ones in Oregon that are killing cattle and move them to Colorado because the voters said we had to do it.
Have you ever hunted in Maine?
No.
I had a bear tag in Maine a few years ago, and I asked him, I said, so what about coyotes? If I see a coyote, can I shoot it? And he said, no. Mm-mm. So what do you mean? He said, well, we have to check every coyote in at a check station. Closest one's 3 hours. And he said, and if it has any percentage of wolf in it, you're screwed.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, it could be 95% coyote, but if it's got any wolf DNA in it whatsoever, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Because they want to protect these wolves. And I'm like, what? Like, I was just blown away by this.
And it's just so political.
You're not from Kansas. We see a coyote, we shoot it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because they're out of control. Predators out of control. But the whole wolf thing, I can't imagine how much you have to hate wildlife to want forced introduction with no management of wolves, because all they do is kill. They kill everything. They kill everything they see. And if it's a big animal, they don't even kill it. They just eat it to death.
Yeah.
They eat it alive. And you see videos of that, and I can't imagine the mindset that says, I want more of this. It's just so sad to me to think you hate wildlife so much that you want them gone.
Yeah.
It's really, really what it amounts to. You want them all dead.
Now, don't get us wrong. As biologists, we're not biologists, but as people who love the wildlife, as conservationists, we're not saying kill every single wolf and get them off the planet. They serve their role, but they have to be managed.
They have to be managed.
Just like everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't have deer hunting seasons. Well, we can look at Kansas again.
Yeah.
If there weren't managed, if we were not managing the herds, they don't thrive.
Right. Wolves are okay, but too many wolves is just horrendous.
Yeah.
And that gets back to, you asked how Kansas got to be such a great deer hunting area. Well, it's the season structure, and it was predator control. Back when the deer were struggling, the fur prices were high enough that there weren't that many predators. I was a trapper in high school and right after, and trying to supplement my income, and there weren't very many coyotes, because in 1979 you get $50 a piece for a coyote. That's like $200 today.
Yeah.
So people trapped and people hunted and people called, and they kept the population down. Same thing with raccoons and skunks and all fur bearers. The population was low, and because of that, we had lots of things that we like to hunt and eat. And the anti-hunter can say, well, it was all out of balance. Okay, but what is balance? We have game departments that can balance anything precisely year after year, barring, weather catastrophes or barring disease. They know exactly how many animals are going to be there year after year. But you guys won't let them do their job. You force them, through lawsuits, you make them introduce wolves in places where they've never been and shouldn't have been.
Based off of nothing but emotion.
Nothing but emotions. And what people don't realize is the base emotion of those people is to end hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And if the wolves have to kill every deer out there to end hunting, they're fine with that. And no, that can't be. That can't be. But at the base of it, that's what it is.
Yeah.
There's how can you hate wildlife so much that you'd rather see them all dead and gone than allow humans to hunt?
So to answer the question about will Pope and Young accept wolves, we want to. Because we want to see them as a managed wildlife, as a managed big game species.
Absolutely. Bring them in the fold.
But until they're managed, we can't accept them.
Well, to some extent, they're managed in Alaska and Wyoming and outside of the Yellowstone Park. There's places where they're managed. We could, but there hasn't been a reason to yet.
Yeah. Interesting. I will say the biggest... Here's what people's going to see change in Pope and Young. From my side of things, Pope and Young is going to make a conscious effort to reach a younger crowd. So next year, anticipate seeing us at some total archery challenges. We've already talked with Scott, and maybe do a dialed Pope and Young pint night or something at a TAC event.
Okay,
but that's what you are going to see. You're going to see more information coming out about the history of Pope and Young, why we exist, what we do for you, the misconceptions about Pope and Young, how to become a member, how to find a measure, just really trying to reach the younger crowd, because like I said, we are the voice for all bow hunters. And I was on that, the first generation to not realize what Pope and Young did and what Pope and Young stood for. You ask my dad or anybody older, what does Pope and Young do? Well, they created my bow hunting seasons. They have my full support. But I was born with bow hunting seasons. I've always had bow hunting seasons. So therefore I've always taken them for granted.
Right.
And so we really want to make a strong push to inform the younger crowd that we need you. We need your voice. There's power in numbers. And when we go before, say New Mexico tries to ban bow hunting, when we go before those legislators, what means more to say we're 10,000 members or we're 2 million members?
Right.
And we want to support your rights as a bow hunter. We want to continue to monitor new technologies that are introduced into hunting, to ensure, again, the future of bow hunting. And so your voice matters. The only voice that doesn't matter is the voice that isn't heard.
Right.
And so,
well, you kind of hit on it right there. Our success to some extent has been our downfall. Our early success, getting bow hunting only seasons in every state, all over the country, was great, absolutely great. But then at some point, people think, well, we've always had it.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been here and always will be here. So why do you need the Pope and Young Club anymore? Well, just like we talked about crossbows and the rifle season, trying to move up into the rut. There's constant battles. Every state we have battles that the bow hunting organizations fight, and the Pope and Young Club isn't big enough to fight every battle, but we do have a good enough network where we can help states and be involved on the national level. We can make a difference.
Absolutely.
But we could make a bigger difference if we had more members.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I really don't understand, if you're a serious bow hunter, why you're not a member. It's kind of like, if you're a gun owner, why aren't you a member of the NRA?
And, I'll just say this, you guys spend a lot of money on archery equipment. I've seen dudes drop, $2,000 on the bow and then 600 on the sight. And you've got $4,000 on your bow set up, and then you drop another, few hundred on the arrows and 100 on the broadheads and all this money. And then you add up all the money you spend on your camo and your boots and your tags and all of this stuff. But the very best investment that you can make as a hunter is $45 a year for someone to continue to fight to protect your rights as a hunter. And so that's what I'll say there.
Absolutely.
You can make all this investment on all the archery equipment, but if your bow hunting season is taken, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So for just $45 a year, it's one of the single best investments you can make to see somebody continue to fight for your rights as a bow hunter. Who doesn't love a good gun? Who doesn't love a good gun shop? Just walk in, get up on the countertop stool, and share stories with the boys. Talk guns, talk calibers, talk recent hunts. It's a good time. Gun shops are a great place to go and hang out. However, there's a couple gun shops that do it better than others. And then there's one gun shop that really stands out. Powder and String Outfitters. Yeah, I'm a little biased because it's right here in the great town of Wellington, Kansas, right here in my hometown. However, I can tell you that anybody that walks into Powder and String is basically blown away, because Powder and String Outfitters takes you back to a time where, downtown shops were experts in their trade, where a man's word was his bond. They got a creaky floor, and they got rustic decor, and they've got a massive selection of guns and ammos. They're a full-service gun shop. They've got an in-house hot bluing facility. They've got a full machine shop. They've got a custom legendary gun engraver. Literally, when I say legendary, Mr. Brian Strange, their hand engraver, is world class. They've got the engraver. They've got gunsmiths. They have everything that you could ever possibly dream of having in a gun shop. They're also a small town, hometown, family-owned shop where you can call and talk to the owner. Guys, they've taken that same feel, that same great gun shop feel, and made it available online, powderandstring.com. You can buy all your guns, all your ammo, all your shooting accessories right there online in the convenience of your own home. You can stand behind the people that you're supporting because the guys are phenomenal. And again, I am of the opinion that if I'm going to shop for guns and ammo, I don't want to do it at a big box store. I want to support somebody like the Powder and String staff. So guys, go check them out for all your guns, all your ammo, all your shooting accessories. They've got it. They are knowledgeable. You can call them. You can talk to somebody, figure out what you need, why you need it, how you need it. They'll take care of you. I actually just bought a new shotgun there. Bought a new A300, and the first shot out of that gun was a dead bird. That's what I'm talking about. And I got it based off their recommendation. Guys, they're phenomenal people. Somebody you can be proud of supporting. Go check them out, powderandstring.com. Jim, this is only the second episode I've done it. My new sign-off, because of how well it was received at the Pope and Young convention, my new sign-off is keep the dusty side up.
All righty.
If you don't know the story behind that, you'll have to go back a few episodes and listen. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Keep the dusty side up.